This is Thomas Mills with Politics NC. We're here with the latest installment of Restless Natives NC. And as usual, we have Anderson Clayton, chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party, and we have political analyst extraordinaire Travis Fain. Folks, glad y'all are here. Let's get started today. Let's talk about what's going on nationally, because I think one thing that's dominating a lot of the domestic politics right now is our shutdown. And we right now literally have a government shutdown. People are not going to work. People are not getting paychecks. Travis, why don't you give us get us up to speed on exactly what's happened?
Yeah, I mean, so this is kind of fallout from the big beautiful bill, right? Democrats finally have enough leverage because this part of the budgeting process in Congress has to go through Congress in a certain way, whereas the big beautiful bill and other things didn't need as many votes to pass. That's reconciliation versus normal order, which I'm not going to get into. But I mean, Democrats have said, look, you have really messed up the healthcare system in this country, Republicans. You're doing away with some federal subsidies that help people, myself included, afford Affordable Care Act policies. A lot of small business people, for example, rely on these, and the federal government kicks a little bit of money in. That's going away. These major subsidies are going away under current law. And so people's premiums are going to, in some cases, double. Like, it varies, but I mean, it's millions and millions of people across the country. So Democrats have finally, I think, responded to what a lot of their base wants, which is, hey, fight back. Fight back, on this healthcare issue, on other issues too, because I mean, they're granted, there are plenty of them. And so the federal government, or at least major parts of it, are shut down. 82,000 people in North Carolina furloughed, I believe. Anderson was saying before we came on that the last checks for people in the military, October 4th. And yeah, we'll see. I mean, so far, it's just kind of loggerheads in D.C., and Republicans are saying, oh, Democrats shut down the government. Democrats shut down the government. They're trying to make it about a very small part of the argument, which deals with how hospitals are reimbursed if they provide health care to someone who's in the country and undocumented. Republicans, of course, are spinning this as Democrats want health care for illegal immigrants. I don't know how you do that. Y'all said you deported all of them. You're going to deport all of them. I don't know how we're giving free health care to people that you said you were deporting all of them. But it just doesn't seem like it's moving forward. The Republicans keep putting the same bill up for a vote instead of just negotiating with Democrats as, on this, that, or the other to actually reopen the government.
Yeah, sounds sort of similar to what we're seeing right now in North Carolina, too. I think at a state level, you've got a government shutdown at the federal level, and you've got a government shutdown, in my opinion, when the state legislatures refuse to pass a budget for over 100 days, as Democratic Minority Leader Senator Sidney Batch reminded us yesterday. She's put a clock in her office for those of you that have not been to the NCGA, because why would you, honestly, right? They never actually have times where regular people can come in and talk to them because they have session during the day instead of at a time when working folks could actually be there to talk about legislation that's being passed. But if you'd ever like to go see our Democratic reps, they'd love to have you. But I do think that exactly what Republicans and what we're seeing overall, in my opinion, is that Republicans cannot govern, which is something that I think they have accused Democrats of doing over and over again. But we have seen that Republicans now have majority control of Congress, the presidency, the state legislature, and every bit of power that they have to make lives better for people across North Carolina and across the country. And instead, they have decided they would rather go down the rabbit hole of just shutting it down completely. And what the sad thing is that military service members and people that are furloughed right now still have to show up for work. I mean, like folks that are essential service workers, so your TSA agents and folks like that are in your airports and things, that they're still having to go to work even though they're not being paid right now, which is obviously why you're seeing places like Burbank in California that has TSA workers that have stopped showing up. They had more sick calls come in since the government shutdown has happened. And so flying right now is getting less safe because you have less people that are operating across the country, right? And you also have the ability for us to see these impacts on the ground, I think, closer to home for federal workers across the country that are right now wondering when the government's going to decide to reopen itself, because Republicans are not going to get up and do it.
Would either of you guys, so as you mentioned, we don't have a budget in North Carolina. No new budget is passed. But years ago, I believe under the Republican majority, they passed a law that said, look, if this happens and we don't pass a new budget by the deadline, by the July 1 beginning of the new fiscal year, the old budget just continues. Like it's an automatic continuing resolution. Do y'all think that would be a good idea at the federal level? Or, nobody likes a shutdown, but it does require movement. It pushes brinksmanship to the point where maybe something changes. So, I mean, what's the thinking there? Like, would you like to see this automatic CR at the federal level too? Is it good policy?
I mean, it doesn't require North Carolina legislators to do the job that they are the one job that they have to come to Raleigh every year and supposed to do. North Carolina, right? Just to remind everybody, it's a citizen legislature, which means that it's a part time. It is paid $13,000 a year. These folks are supposed to be able to go to Raleigh for a short period of time, do the work of the state, and then be able to leave and go back and do a different job. What the Republicans in Raleigh have forced people, their entire legislature to do, is forced working people in the legislature to have to continuously be willing to come back to Raleigh every single month at a drop a hat's notice, a dime's notice, and it has made people be able to not have. It's made the legislature not be able to have working people that are working 2 or 3 jobs. Like, it's limited the type of people that are able to even serve in the legislature because of the way in which the legislature has worked. Because they've done, if I'm not mistaken, and Travis, you've covered Raleigh longer than I have, at least been in this job, right? I don't think that they've ever passed a budget on time for as long as Republicans have been in charge of the legislature. But what's the history on that? Do
I
you
don't
know?
know if it's ever, but I think it's more common than not that they go past the July 1 start. And you make a really good point though about how power is consolidated and wielded in a legislature, and how the schedule and leaving it so you're just constantly in session. You're just you never really know, do I have to be in Raleigh for something important or not in 6 months? It does limit who can serve, and it concentrates power in the leadership and the people who make those scheduling decisions. We don't often think about how a schedule can be, maybe weaponized is not the right word, but it's
It is the
directionally
right
correct.
word. Weaponization is the exact right word there, Travis Fain, and it's why it was on the tip of your tongue. You're like, oh, maybe I should take that one back. Oh, maybe I don't know, but I'm like, no, it is weaponization of, to your point, of leadership and the ability to who we put in those positions of power, right? And for me, it's looking at a legislature that I don't think it should be a part-time legislature. I think North Carolina is the third fastest growing in the state right now, or the third fastest growing state in the country, right? Like, we need a legislature that is working honestly 7 days a week for people across North Carolina and for their constituents. But that would also mean that we'd have Republicans that would want to see a full-time legislature be put into play. And they don't want to do that right now because majority of the people that they have in positions of power in Raleigh are lawyers, people that are independently wealthy, make 6 figures already, and don't have to necessarily face what the rest of the North Carolina constituency does, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I would 100% favor a constitutional amendment that would, if go to a full-time legislature or something close to it, but significantly increase the pay. Put it somewhere, maybe you tie it to the average teacher salary, maybe you tie it to the median income for people in North Carolina, but make it so that it is a job, widen who can serve, and just, yeah, I spread the power out a little bit.
Because the other thing that you do when the taxpayers are paying your legislators, you never have to worry who else is funneling money into their pockets.
That's
It is
right.
accountability metrics. You pay for what you get for at the end of the day. And in my opinion, right now, we have way too many legislators that are bought and paid for by people like Duke Energy and corporate interest across this state right now who have no business deciding the fate and the future of people across North Carolina. Only people across North Carolina should be able to do that. And so if you care about your legislators being independently on their own, and also, or the independent nature of somebody in the legislature, and also your rights, I just think that it goes hand in hand for all parties, right? You know, you want Republicans, Democrats, unaffiliated, whoever, to be bought and paid for by the people, not corporations or special interests in your legislature.
Oh, that's a good line, Anderson. You gotta use that somewhere else. Bought and paid for by the people. That's a great line.
Well, I'll take it from you then.
One thing that the continuing resolution does is it rewards the people that want to burn down the government. There are people that don't want they think that government, what was the word that guy used? Government small enough to strangle in the toilet or
Yeah,
whatever, in
to
the
drown in a
bathtub,
bathtub,
right
yeah.
around in the bathtub. It rewards those people. It makes them obstructionists. They don't want anything to happen. They don't want government to work. I mean, at the end of the day, Republicans don't believe that government can do anything right. So therefore, they underfund it, they underpay people, and if you have a situation where they always know that there's gonna be a budget that's based on last year's revenue, there's no reason for them to go out and support anything new unless there's some good in it for them.
Well, that's
So
the fiscal side of that too. Take out the political side of it all. You have special projects last year that got approved in a budget that if they're not reapproved with the continuing budget because there's no reauthorization of those
right.
funds. So it goes back to the base budget that you had. So I mean, if you're accounting for inflation, population changes, any of the things that you would see that a someone actually being responsive to a changing budget like a legislator should be, it doesn't make fiscal sense for you to have or for you to not actually or pass a new budget each year.
Well, and one of the ways that's really expressing itself right now is in Medicaid. You know, a lot of people rely on Medicaid in this state for their health care, and something called the rebase basically isn't happening, where basically you take the number of people and you take how much it costs to serve them, and you tweak the state budget, which takes federal pass-through dollars to pay for Medicaid to reimburse doctors. And so there's a I can't remember how many hundreds of millions hole, but because the budget hasn't passed, there's a hole. And so Medicaid
$418 million, Travis.
$418 million. That's real money, even in the context of a multi-billion-dollar annual Medicaid program. It's very real money. And so that expresses itself in a lot of ways. I mean, it hits doctors, it hits hospitals. The hospitals are worried, particularly given what the way federal policy is changing on hospitals, and many billions more being threatened. I think I heard Josh Dobson, who is the head of the Hospital Association here in North Carolina, former labor commissioner, former Republican state lawmakers say, and I can't remember if it was 32 billion or 39 billion was the impact, but I mean, it's big numbers. And then on a smaller scale, if you rely on a home health care worker, I know a guy, he's got significant physical disabilities, but he's able to live a much better life because he has these home health care workers come in, and they're going to take cuts along the area of $1 or maybe a little less than $1 an hour in a cut. I mean, how do you imagine if your salary is just suddenly cut? Your boss says, "Hey, tough times. We're going to cut your hourly wage by $1." Um, how do
No,
you keep
I
doing it?
honestly it makes me emotional about how many people are gonna wake up one day and not have the help that they need anymore because folks have decided they wanna be too selfish to make it happen. Like, that is what we're experiencing right now. Like the rural tour this summer, I think I remember talking with y'all about it of just how many people had brought their kids with them to those tours and they would say, my kid is on Medicaid right now. Like what is about to happen? And you have people that are already making proactive cuts to health insurance. Like providers are already looking at who they're going to cut and who's on the chopping block, right? Or insurance providers in that sense are looking at who is on the chopping block for when these sort of impacts cut them too, because they're like, we're not going to be able to offer as good of services to people that are even on private insurance now too. And I think it's just the entire system is going to collapse here if Republicans don't do something about it. But
Well, that's the political impact of the shutdown, really. It's not the idea that they're not functioning. People aren't paying enough attention to the government, but what they are paying attention to is how their lives are impacted directly. And I think if you start seeing people losing services and people watching their premiums, I think I saw something where they were up like 3 or 4 times. I think it was in Alaska. They've already sent out letters. I'm on the Affordable Care Act. I'm self-employed. My insurance could easily more than triple, and it makes it almost unaffordable. And when you start seeing large numbers of people start to lose their insurance or start to pay a significant larger portion of their income for healthcare, then you're going to have a backlash. And I started doing politics professionally in the late '90s or mid '90s, by the late 90s, healthcare was a dominant conversation. And the reason is we had a growing number of uninsured people and we had spiraling healthcare costs. So people were getting their premiums were going up 10, 15, 20% a year. And there was an outrage. There was a backlash to it, and it's what really led to both the 2006 and then 2008 Democratic waves. And if you strip people's health care away, Republicans are going to see that type of reaction again. I mean, my core philosophy about elections is voters are self-interested. And when you take their health care away, you're taking something that is very important away from them, or you're charging them more for something that they desperately need. And in some ways, I think it will be more impactful even than what you've seen with the inflation, because inflation crept up. You're talking about shocks to systems. I mean, I have a friend. I got a friend who just lost his Medicaid, and he works hard, and he doesn't know what he's going to do. He didn't have health insurance before they expanded Medicaid, so he's going back to where he was before. But that's the political impact, and that's where Republicans could pay a political price for what's going on right now, more so than just the concept of a shutdown.
Are you saying he got it because of Medicaid expansion,
Yes,
Thomas?
he got health insurance for the first time in his adult life because they expanded Medicaid,
Wow.
Oh,
Wow.
and
that's
he's losing it.
me
So
and her always told that story about a woman named Penny and giving her her health insurance card for the first time, and that's sort of what that reminds me of, is having somebody say that, and I'm just like, I do not know why Republicans are dead set on taking away something that they just gave to people.
Yeah. Although I will say, there's something like 3 million people with expansion who are on Medicaid. A lot of those people are children, disabled people. A lot of them are senior citizens. Some of them are like your friend Thomas, where they work at a job, maybe multiple jobs, but none of those jobs provide health insurance and they don't make enough to buy it because we just talked about how expensive it is. So the 3 million figure in a state of 12 million people tells me two things. One, these are not sorry people who are just living off the government. We don't have 3 million of those people in our state. That's ridiculous. And two, it's probably not sustainable. Like 3 million out of 12 million people, or 2.8, whatever the number is close to that. I don't know how sustainable it is unless you go to something like a single payer model, which frankly, the more I deal with health insurance and the more I look at it, the more I think that might be the way to go. I'm not necessarily trying to take us into that specific conversation, but just these numbers and these dollar signs, they're huge. And so I understand why the Republican Party wants to make those numbers go down. It's just it has real implications on people when you hit them with it, especially when they're working a job and perhaps their corporate master is not, willing to pay a wage that allows them to buy their own health insurance and certainly doesn't offer health insurance as part of their job. So that's a structural societal problem that government is trying to fix. But the reality may just be it's too expensive even for government to fix.
I mean, it's not too expensive for government to option or to offer a private or a public option to something, though. Like, we can create a healthcare system, and it's not saying that you have to have solely a public option and no private companies. It's just saying, like, you need competition in the healthcare space, because to the point that we have made throughout this, it is too expensive. And what prevents something from being too expensive when you have competition and not monopolies over something? And we have seen consolidation of our healthcare system to no end, and that is where the government is supposed to come in my opinion, and break up consolidation, break up big monopolies, and say, actually, we're going to offer a baseline healthcare level at this rate, and we're going to make sure that everybody has access to pay it. You can have private insurance all the hell you want to. Go out there and grab it. But I bet they're not going to be able to beat this rate right here. And if they can, fantastic. Join the fight, friends. Have at it. But until I see that point in time, I think the government has an extremely important role to play. And that 3 million people should scare folks for the type of pricing that we are seeing of health insurance that's pricing people out of being able to access private health insurance. And to me, that means that there is a level of public accountability that could be had there. But it doesn't need to be the only type of health insurance if that's what's going to frighten people out of hell is Medicare for all, for God's sakes, you know?
Well, let's switch gears real briefly, or not briefly. Let's switch gears. And you know, one of the things, Republicans may not be fearing elections, and that's my fear. Is we're watching them consolidate control in North Carolina, but states across the country over the process of elections. And in this state, we just had an election where a majority of the Supreme Court voted to change the rules after the fact. And when they lost that, the legislature took control of the State Board of Elections away from the governor and gave it randomly to the state auditor.
It wasn't
You
random,
know-
Travis or Thomas. They couldn't gain they couldn't win the governor's office because of Mark Robinson, and they couldn't take the Secretary of State's office
that's-
because of Elaine Marshall. Come on now.
Right,
It wasn't
right.
random.
But
They
I'm saying
picked whichever one they could win, and they
Why
gave it to him.
why didn't they give it to the treasurer, or why didn't they give it to the Department of Labor? They gave it to auditor. It was like, there's a Republican that we can trust. And what do they mean by trust? They mean we can trust him to do our bidding. And they got Dave Boliak in there, who they believe will use the State Board of Elections as a Republican tool. And speaking of Republican tools, he hired Dallas Woodhouse. And that Dallas Woodhouse has been nothing but a political hack and a political tool his entire career. He was head of the Republican state Republican Party. He was executive director of state Republican Party for a while. He ran a number of GOP.
In 2018, Thomas. No, to go into it. He was the head of the Republican Party in 2018. And they had the only case of voter fraud in the entire state from a congressional race that Dallas Woodhouse defended, and he now leads in the state board.
Oh, and this is a guy who defends. He has made a career out of defending the bad behavior of the Republican Party in North Carolina. And now he's the liaison to the county boards, which are also now controlled by Republicans. Let me clarify what he's doing. He's going into the the county boards of elections, and giving them advice on how not to run fair elections, to run elections that benefit Republicans. Because that's what he's done his entire life. And the chair of the State Board of Elections is a guy named Francis DeLuca, who Francis was head of the Civitas Institute, a Republican or right-wing, really, think tank that bashed Democrats and spread sometimes bad information about Democrats with an attempt to elect Republicans. They had a PAC. These people are not folks that are interested in free and fair elections. These are people who are interested in Republicans winning, and they are controlling our boards of elections. That's wrong. That's just flat out bad government.
You are certainly right that partisans have been given new roles. Dallas is some sort of election integrity role with all 100 boards of election.
That's funny.
And it's interesting that Bullock picked him. He's put a lot of political capital right now. A lot of Dave Bullock's political capital just got tied up in Dallas Woodhouse. That's a choice. That's a real choice. Anderson, you mentioned the voter fraud case in the congressional district. That was the Mark Harris race, the first one, the one that was thrown out because of election fraud. Mark Harris is now in Congress. The people of Charlotte and that or that general area decided to go with him when he ran again.
No. Gerrymandering is what helped them. Don't you dare blame voters for Mark Harris, Travis Fain. Don't you do that to them. Gerrymandering. But keep going.
I blame voters for everything. Gerrymandering is voters' fault. But I digress. What I was going to mention was there was also the bribery scandal, where the guy that Dallas Woodhouse worked for, the chairman of the Republican Party at that time, back whatever year it was, he got indicted and convicted and ultimately pardoned by President Trump because the party was taking so much money from a guy named Greg Lindbergh, who's a big time insurance executive, who was convicted at one point of trying to bribe the state insurance commissioner, who wore a wire for the FBI, Republican state insurance commissioner, by the way, who wore a wire for the FBI, Mike Causey. And, Dallas has a reputation of, he talks a lot in the media, or at least he used to. So it's just going to be interesting what happens with Dallas and how that goes and what sort of fallout there is to it. I still feel good about elections in North Carolina. I want to say that. I think, Thomas, you made a lot of reasonable points there. But I'll say the same thing that I said to Republicans and conspiracy theorists who were worried about elections when they were controlled by Democrats because the governor appointed the boards. I think a lot of those appointments were less partisan than what we're seeing now. But 100 counties, 100 staffs, working for 100 boards, a lot of people who just want to run good elections still involved in elections in North Carolina. So I will feel good, absent further information, about election results going forward. But yeah, I don't like it being a political football. I don't like it being something like what we're seeing here, where we don't like what this guy did, so we're going to take control from him, and we're going to take the Supreme Court first so that we can take control from him, because Republicans in the General Assembly tried several times to shift power at the Board of Elections like they've done now, but it wouldn't get through the courts.
Also didn't get past the voters.
Fair enough.
This is what I think I need my two historians on this call of North Carolina politics to explain to the people that are listening to this podcast right now. What is the history of North Carolina Republicans trying to take control of the one constitutional power, or one of the one constitutional powers that I feel like Republicans had left in control of the governor's office in the state? And what does it say in both of y'all's journalistic perspectives about when you have a branch of government that decides it can control what other powers the other branches of government can or cannot have, and reassigns them, in fact, like we have seen with the legislative branch taking powers away from one person in the executive, giving it to another person in the executive, and the judicial branch backing up the legislative branch in their ability to do so. What do you all think about that?
I mean, our Constitution does give the legislature the most power.
Wrong person to ask was Travis Fain.
They have exercised it. I mean, the history that you lay out, or that you kind of allude to, you're right. Like, they've tried it several ways. They've not been able to do it legally yet, and now they've done it legally. They've transitioned power from a Democrat to a Republican, which is what they were trying to do for a very long time, and now they've done it successfully.
So, like, what, 8 years, 10 years? Well, how long are we talking here?
At least a decade, right? Like, right? Thomas, you'll have a better memory of this than I will. But I mean, I remember covering more than one lawsuit fighting these sorts of changes, and they were fought successfully until, I don't know, somebody got pretty smart over in the General Assembly and said, "Well, what about the auditor?"
But they also, to Thomas's point earlier, right, tried to pass put a ballot referendum, which you cannot do in North Carolina unless you put it through the legislature. You can't do citizen referendums on your ballot, which is what a lot of people think we should be able to do because other states can. I agree with y'all. Go advocate to our Republican legislature for them to change that. But as of right now, yeah, you can only put a referendum on the ballot if it goes through our legislature. They did this to ask the voters if they wanted to take power away from the governor and give it to the legislature in order to appoint these boards of elections members to control elections. And the people of North Carolina did what, Thomas?
They said no. They rejected that. But, here's the other thing, though. I agree with Travis. The Constitution in North Carolina gives the legislature more power than the governor, but it gives the governor very specific powers, and really it gives the governor the executive power. This is an executive function. So when it may not have been explicitly written into the Constitution that it was the governor's, the state board would fall under the governor's purview, but it sure did assume that. What it did not assume was that you would have Republicans who were trying to undermine democracy. And that's what we have right now. We have one party that basically does not believe in democracy. And they see everything as a political tool. And it's really hard for me to believe that Boliak or Bolick, whatever, however you pronounce
I
his
was
name.
gonna say, I think you've been saying his name wrong, but I was gonna let it go because I was like,
What? How do you say it? Bolick?
Bullock.
Bolick?
And there's a whole history of Dave Bullock too, right? UNC Board of Trustees
I know.
taking away DEI on their campus first. That's
Right.
why
There's no way you're going to convince me that that guy's not using this for partisan gain. And look, the problem here, and I am part of the problem. I don't have trust in our institutions that are run by Republicans. I don't believe that the Supreme Court of North Carolina is fair. I believe it's stacked with partisans who would find a way, partly because I just watched it, find a way to subvert the Constitution in order to give themselves partisan advantage. I saw it with the state Court of Appeals, where they literally invented stuff in order to basically undermine the choice of the voters. And when you start putting people like Dallas Woodhouse, Francis DeLuca in positions of power, you're telling us you're not like going, well, maybe we're trying to be fair. You're saying, nope, we see our control of the state board elections as a political advantage. And that's never been done. The other thing is
Well, and now wait a minute.
Every former governor.
Travis, I'd love to see you argue the other side of that. Bring it on.
Former governor opposed this move. Republicans opposed moving it from the state board, from the governor to the auditor. Pat McCrory, Jim Martin, they opposed that move because they knew it was wrong. But the other thing is, Travis, back, I hear you're going to say that Democrats did some things, but Democrats held Democrats accountable. There are people that went to prison because of what Democratic State Board of Elections found out about Democrats and then passed it on. They didn't say, oh, well, you're a Democrat, we should ignore it. That's what Republicans do. They don't hold anybody on their side accountable, and they use the positions, they use the institutions to give themselves passes. We're seeing it at the federal level. We're seeing it at the state level. To me, this turning every institution into partisan advantage is new. It's not something that has been throughout my lifetime. There were times where people said, let's put people in positions of authority who are nonpartisan or who can see beyond partisanship. And I don't think we have that at the state level anymore.
You don't at the state level, but you do on the ground. And I think to Travis's point, and to your point too, Thomas, that you made when we were talking about stuff earlier of just like, there was a day and time when people were going into the legislature in the 90s because they cared about their communities and they wanted to be good people. And I think that we still have a lot of really good people who are running elections at the ground level. I do think we have hyper partisan board of elections right now at both the county and the state level. That is the first time for y'all listening to this who are like, the board of elections, first time this has ever happened in 100 years, right? That we have a Republican controlled board of elections because of the power swimming to the state auditor instead of staying with the governor, right? And I think that should be the thing that Thomas is pointing out of like, this is unprecedented, this is wild, this is crazy. But the point that Travis made that I think is really important is that we should still trust our elections until they give us a reason not to. And right now, we need to make sure that if you want to sign up to be a poll observer, because what I want you to have faith in, Thomas Mills, ain't the Republicans in Raleigh. It is a state party chair, and it's a Cat Lawson, the voter protection director in the North Carolina Dems. And it is making sure that you've got faith in your other party to say we're going to hold their asses accountable and make sure that we've got somebody in every polling site inside and outside of it in North Carolina next year that is going to be able to report, and also this year for municipal elections. But we are talking a lot about next year. And we're doing it this year because we want to know what boards of elections are going to give us problems this year across the state and where we need to have a higher and a deeper monitor on what's going on. But like our voter protection team has 100 lawyers across the state right now, one in every county that at a moment's notice will be at a county voting site. And I think that right now we've got to make sure we have the ground game to protect against that. So ncdp.org/poll observer, if you want to sign up and go to a training and learn how to be one, it's the most important job that I'll tell you could have. If you want to make sure elections are protected, you can be an unaffiliated. You do not have to be a Democrat to sign up with the Democratic Party to be one of those folks. But help us protect the right to vote and make sure that people, when they go to the polls, have somebody friendly that they know is out there to help them if they do have somebody that turns them away for whatever reason, because we do have voter ID laws and exceptions to that right now that are in place. We have polling locations, right, that are shifting and changing around the counties that we're in because boards of elections have decided different locations for voting in counties this year and next year. And so it is going to be a quick step that we're asking people to play with us. But I do want people to feel confident in still going out to the ballot or into the ballot box because, you know, your job is to get out there and make sure that your votes are cast. It's my job to make sure that they are counted and counted correctly. And so let that be our job. But I can't count ballots that aren't cast. So I need to make sure that everybody gets out there and gives us those ballots to be able to go after, because Justice Riggs's race, that 734 vote margin, she was down on election night. And a lot of people, I think, forget this story about the Supreme Court fight. When we went to bed on election night in November last year, everybody thought Allison Riggs was going to lose that Supreme Court fight. She was down by almost 10,000 votes. And we went out and we chased and we cured and made sure that everybody that had cast a provisional ballot, which some of you may be asked to do this year, and if you are, it just requires extra verification steps after you go to the ballot box. But do not leave a voting site without casting a provisional ballot if that's what they say that you have to do when you go out there. But I think that it's really important that people know we're going to be there behind the scenes to make sure that ballot is counted correctly.
Well, let's move to one more topic. Thank you, Anderson. That was inspiring. But
Yeah.
Cool. I was like, wait
Yeah.
a second. We're going down the dark spirals of the Board of Elections, and I still need people that are listening to this to say, no, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to cast my ballot. And actually, I'm going to sign up to do a shift because Anderson just said, man, this is the most important thing I could do right now to help Democrats. So
that's good. The last thing I don't want to talk about is some bad news or unfortunate news. In North Carolina, Cecil Brockman, state legislator from Greensboro, from High Point, has been accused of statutory rape and sexual abuse, child sexual abuse, and he's being held without bond, or at least he was earlier today. So, you know, and the one thing about it is watching everybody step up. You know, Anderson stepped up, called for him to step down. Robert Reeves, minority chair, House Minority Leader, Democrat, called for him to step down. House Republican Speaker called for him to step down. And I think that's positive. You know what's not positive? Where are all those Republicans calling for Donald Trump to step down? Why do they hold Donald Trump to a different standard than they hold Cecil Brockman? You know, Donald Trump's been credibly found liable for sexual assault. There's a pretty good damn chance that he was sexually abusing teens.
Or why aren't they calling for the release of the Epstein Files?
Release the Epstein Files. Let's find out.
That's the thing, right? Like,
and the thing about the Epstein Files, I didn't even put much credibility to them until they started insisting they would not release them. There's a reason that they aren't releasing these things. After the big deal that Donald Trump made about releasing the Epstein Files, I guess he hoped it would go away. But now he's doing everything he can to keep them from being released. Congress basically is shut down to some degree because Democrats they're going to have the votes to release to force a release of the Epstein files when they swear in the woman from Arizona.
Adelita Duralva? Yeah.
Yeah,
Who
I
they
mean, that,
probably should have sworn in, what, 2 weeks ago? It
Yeah,
seems
should have been
clear that
anyway.
the
sworn
House
in.
Republicans are playing delay tactic on that.
Right. And they are doing everything they can not to let those Epstein files see the light of day. And there's a reason for that. And you got to think it has to do with Donald Trump. So,
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, a
there
good
were,
rule of thumb is when a political entity will not do something that is wildly popular, and releasing the Epstein files is wildly popular. The reason they won't do it is because whatever it would expose is worse than not doing
right.
the popular thing.
It's more damaging to release them than not release them.
Right.
And, you know, I think Republicans need to step up. If they're going to say that we need to hold Cecil Brockman accountable before his trial, then we need to hold Donald Trump to that same standard.
I will say on Brockman, I like the way Democrats responded on that. It's another place where I thought the Reeves you mentioned, and the governor you mentioned, the governor was
Right.
unequivocal. He was quick. I tell y'all, every time it seems like when something where I think the governor's going to have something to say about it, and I go and say, well, let's see what Governor Stein has to say about it. I find that the statement is very strong. It's well done. It's well worded. It's to the point, and I'm in general agreement with it. I think this guy speaks for me. So I really feel like just from a leadership level, he's doing really well in this state. I will say though, it's pretty easy to call for Cecil Brockman to resign, given the severity. I think he's accused of some sort of. I don't even. It sounds like the kid was 15. I don't know, beyond that. All I know is what's in police reports and coverage. But Brockman also has been one of the more likely people to vote with the Republicans in the North Carolina House and help, create that supermajority that they've got there. So Brockman was not popular with Democrats to begin with, but that doesn't change the fact that they've moved quickly to condemn what he's accused of doing and calling him to resign, which,
I was about
that's
to
all you can do.
don't go sounding like Andrew Dunn now on Twitter to me, okay? He was saying like this is I I'm telling you from a party chair yesterday, there was only shock and disappointment and sadness that ran through our party when that came out. And I think that anybody who thought otherwise about how Democrats were going to react obviously doesn't know one to talk to one enough to know it. Like that, I mean, genuinely, I did not hear anybody shout for cheers of joy after reading that and understanding what happened. And to the point that you made, the severity of them enough were to say no one who is even arrested for that right now should be involved in trying to represent people across a community or a district at this moment in time, and needs to prioritize himself and focusing on his life and making sure that that is taken care of, while also constituents have an obligation to have somebody represent them in Raleigh at this moment in time. And that's just not able to happen with both. But I was not happy when folks the other day were bringing up, oh, well, Democrats must feel, and I was like, no, actually, I just feel really disgusted. And I'm glad, quite frankly, that it was to Thomas, your first point, it was an overwhelming from all sides. It finally felt like, oh, wow, all of us can agree on one thing. Child pedophiles should be in the ground somewhere. Like,
Unless you're Donald Trump.
not up here with us. Yeah, I mean, genuinely, Thomas, I think you make a good point of like, how could it be so easy to do it then and not at a national level right now? And to me, that is something that I feel like every news reporter, I hope will go around and ask my Republicans in Raleigh right now of, how do you feel about and not even saying Donald Trump's like, how do you feel about him not releasing the Epstein files when you were so quick to bring Cecil Brockman down and say that he deserved to resign from his position? When you feel this way about child predators, I mean, genuinely, let's think about it.
You know, one thing that I think people often feel like Donald Trump emerged sometime in the last decade or so. What people forget is this guy was bragging about seeing naked teenagers at shows when he was head of the Teen Miss USA project. This was in the 90s. This isn't something somebody set him up for. This is something he bragged about on television. You can do that when you own the show. You can go in there and watch them undress. This is guy that these people are defending. There's credible evidence that this guy may have been involved with a serial sexual abuser, and they won't even investigate it. They won't even look into it. You know, if you go back and listen to his interviews with Howard Stern, when Howard Stern asked him how young is too young, he said there is no too young. You know, this guy has all the hallmarks of a sexual abuser and a predator. He's president of the United States, and the Republicans rally around him and defend him. Not for what he said, not for what people are saying he said recently, but for what he said about himself 25 and 30 years ago.
Not even that. I'm pretty positive they asked for his endorsement, don't they, Thomas Mills? I mean,
They asked for his endorsement.
I think Phil
exactly
Berger's up
right.
there calling him, saying he'll trade a congressional seat for it, in fact. It must be worth something.
That's right. Right. So, but hey, maybe they're all involved in it. Maybe QAnon is a real thing, except these guys got the wrong letter behind them. Maybe it's not Democrats that Q's talking about. Maybe it's Republicans.
There's your clip for social media on this podcast, Tommy. Maybe QAnon is real. We'll get some clicks finally.
I was about to say you might have a whole new audience, Thomas.
Right. No, I'm being facetious. I'm sorry. Just to be clear, I'm mocking you Republicans. I'm mocking your asses because you're so damn stupid you believe something called QAnon. Jesus Christ.
Again, that is a Thomas Mills opinion. Does not reflect the rest of the people on this podcast.
Yeah, but it's true. You guys have embraced QAnon. So, all right, that's probably enough, isn't it? Thanks so much for showing up. I appreciate you guys. We had a great conversation today, even if I got off on the end, but we'll come back soon. Let's try to shoot for 2 more weeks, guys. What do you think?
Yep.
All right. This is Thomas Mills signing off for Politics NC. Have a great week.